Hello again. So today I'm going to be looking at making things out of fiberglass. Specifically, I've got this thing which is a wooden model of this is like a part that goes onto my shed roof. I just needed a corner piece, so I've built one out of wood. I now need to make a fiberglass version of it, and all I've done is I've attached it to a piece of wood with some screws first of all. And what I'm going to do is get some fiberglass. I'm going to use that to make a mould, and then I'm going to use the mould to make a replica of this. So first things first, you need some sort of thing to actually make. So you need a plug, if you like, of the thing that you're going to do, and the better quality you can get on it, the better, because any sort of blemishes will show through on the final thing. Now, in order to do it, we need several things. So first of all, we need some beeswax. Get it off eBay really cheaply, and that is to polish it so that we don't want anything that, when we sort of put the fiberglass resin on, we don't want it to stick. So polish it with beeswax really well to start with, and then we get some PVA release agent. Now you can pick this up off eBay really cheap as well. And what you do, once it's all polished, you put some of this on, a couple of layers of this, and it forms like a membrane so that the fiberglass won't stick to it, because there's no point. If it sticks to it, it's just going to fall apart when you try and take it to bits. So some of that. Some sort of fiberglass, and fiberglass matting is usually the best to use. I've got this fiberglass tape because I already had it left over from something else, so I'm going to use that. The fiberglass tape is for smaller things, and the fiberglass matting you can get sort of thicker, so you get much stronger. And what you do, you have resin and you have fiberglass. The resin gives it its sort of structure, and then the fiberglass gives it its strength and stops it from bending and wobbling all over the place. The other thing you'll need is, in this case, I'm using some epoxy resin. Now that's because I already had it left over from something else, but you can use any other sorts of resin. But usually 2 parts, you mix it together, you get a resin which you can then work with for 10 minutes or so, maybe a bit longer, and you can put it on. I'll show you how to do that. And that's pretty much it. I happen to have some of these which are pump action for the resin, so you don't end up having to weigh it out. So with this you just do a certain number of pumps and then you're good to go. So let's get started. So before you really do anything, what you need to do is figure out on your plug and your mould how it's going to work. So in this case, these bits at the end are going to be open, so I don't need the mould to go around the corners if I don't want to. Likewise, when it reaches the bottom here, you figure out what it's going to do. Is the thing going to tuck underneath, or is it going to come out flat, or are you going to cut it off there? So you've got to figure out what the mould's going to look like. You don't end up with a bit that's wrong, essentially. So have a good think about how the final thing's going to look before you do this. Now, first thing to do is to polish it. So take the beeswax and a cloth and spend some time making sure this is shiny. Usually works better, to be honest, if it's been painted as well. It's less sticky, but let's do that. So here we go. So I'm getting my wax, and really you just rub it all over the thing that you've got. And then you get your cloth, give it a polish. And really, you just keep going until that feels sort of waxy and shiny. Make sure to get everywhere. Anywhere that you miss, the resin will stick. So all down the sides I need it. Around here, everywhere there's going to be resin, there needs to be wax. And also around here, because on this one I'm going to bring the mould down and out along the bottom a little way. So there's going to have to be a rim all around here where it's shiny. So I'll just get on with that now. So now I've finished polishing it, and you can see it's nice and shiny. Now we've got to be careful of it, you don't get any lumps and bumps created by the polishing. Little sort of lumps and bumps in the wax, otherwise what will happen, those lumps or bumps will come through into your final moulding, and you don't want that. So make sure it's nice and flat but nice and shiny. And the next step now is to coat it with some release agent. Now you can get this from eBay or wherever. This is a teeny tiny bottle of it, and what it is really, it's like sort of thick PVA solution blue. You paint it on and it gives you a layer that you can then put your resin onto, and it will mean that you can actually separate the two. Use this without polishing the mould, and you'll find that it won't separate. So it's useful. You need to polish it and then add some of this. So I'll do this next. I'll just pour it into a little jar and I'll paint it on with the paintbrush. So here we go. bit of blue stuff, paint it on. Try and keep it nice and smooth and flat. You don't want bits of sawdust and stuff around, because it will just show up in the final thing. There we go. Now it sticks on the wax all right, because it's really quite a thick solution. And paint it on and make sure everything is covered. Any little bit that you miss, it will stick. And I like to go a little bit further as well and go round the outsides, just to make sure if I spill any resin that it doesn't stick. There we are. I'll put some around here as well, just to be sure, and then some onto the actual board itself, because I'm going to be bringing the resin to the outside. You can't have, well, you can have too much, I suppose, if it makes lumps and bumps, but there we go. Okay, a bit extra on there. Leave that to dry. What I tend to do is add a couple of coats just to make sure. And there we are. Brushes can be cleaned with water. So now that we've got a couple of coats on this, hopefully the resin's not going to stick. So now we're ready to start putting the resin on. So the resin I'm using, I showed you before, it's just this West System stuff. Just because somebody had something, they gave it to me, so I'm going to use that. This works just as well with all sorts of resins. As I said, this is epoxy. So now the way I've got it, as you can see, I've got these pumps. Now these are really good, because one pump from each, one pump from the resin, one pump from the hardener, works. Saves you having to weigh things out, which is much easier. And then I'm going to put it into one of these little plastic cups. You can buy them by the 100. And then a lollipop stick, ideal for stirring it with. And then we'll apply it to the plug using just a cheap brush. Now I will wash these at the end, but it wrecks them, so don't be using a really expensive brush. There we are, ready to go. So gloves on, because this is not good for your skin. And we have one pump, one slow pump from each of these. It says in the instructions you need to pump them slowly. There's one. And there's one. Give it a good mix. And that's ready to go. Now one thing that you can see, this is really quite runny. Now the first coat you would normally use what's called the gel coat, which is much thicker resin, so that it kind of sticks, it doesn't all run off. Now I haven't got any of that, so what I'm going to do, I've got this, but I'm going to leave it for about half an hour so it goes a bit thicker, and then I'm going to paint it on. So bit dodgy, because if you're not careful you'll come back to it and it's set solid, but hopefully, and I'll keep an eye on it, it'll be just a little bit thicker, and then I'll paint it onto the plug. Okay, so it's been half an hour. This is now a bit thicker than it was, so I'm going to start applying it. And the main thing is I'm just going to paint it onto the plug. Do not go over the edges, so make sure it stays within the bit where you've treated and polished, otherwise it will stick. So here we go. I can put it on nice and thick, because this is going to form the outside layer, if you like. So this would be the bit that's shiny when you take it off again. So I'm just painting it on. There we go. Doesn't matter if it looks lumpy and messy, as long as you do not go over the edges. There we go. I'll pan the camera down. A little bit over the top here, but not much. You have to be thinking about what the mould is going to look like, not the actual final product. So the mould is going to come like that. It's going to have a lip on it. And there we are. And I can apply a bit of extra anywhere that I can see like a bit where it's not covered. I can put some on. And now because I've done it, I've left it till it's nice and thick. Hopefully it won't sag too much further. And there we are. That's now ready to dry and we can clean the brush. So cleaning the brush, first thing, get as much of the resin off it as you can. And I like to get a bit of kitchen roll and you can just scrape it, clean off as much as you can. Next thing is this stuff. So I've got a couple of tubs here of acetone. Now you can pick it up on eBay or whatever. It's nail polish remover. Acetone, nice and pure. And that stuff will eat through this, and all you do, you can scoosh it in your one. So that's why I've got the two, a clean one and a dirty one. Give it a good wash in there. You can see that's gone cloudy. Turn it around and then scoosh it around in the second one. And by doing it this way I can use the same acetone throughout. I might need a third one maybe if it gets really... Okay, and then we can just dry that off. I can drop me a bit of tissue paper. Dry that off. Most of it will evaporate anyway. And that brush should be good to go for the next time. And it's time to add the glass resin. So I've put a couple of coats of the what you call the gel coat really on. So that's all ready and it's just tacky. It's not soft, it's just tacky. And then I'm using this sort of ribbon stuff. I prefer to use the matting, but I got this for free, so I'm going to use this. You prepare this first of all, so it's all ready and you're all ready to go. So here we are. I've got several strips of this that I'm going to lay over there. And I've got some other little bits as well to do some corners with. And I've got some resin that I've mixed up. Important to get it all prepared before you get started. So, what I'm going to do first of all is figure out which way I'm going to lay this. I think something like that to start with. And then you take your brush, you wet your brush with the resin, and then you start to dab. Now don't be tempted to start painting it, because especially if you've got matting, what happens is all the matting sticks to the brush and it makes a huge mess everywhere. So just dab it. You can do plenty like this. Make sure it's all wetted so you're looking for any gaps and it'll soon soak in like that. Going around the corner there. Put plenty on. So I'm leaving this little lip here, so I've got, because remember this is going to be the mould. So what I need is for it to have lips that are to these sort of ledges, if you like, that I can then use to peel the mould off and to get the actual thing out of the mould as well. Pull it tight. Now you're sort of stretching it over the plug as you go, because if you don't, you'll end up with big sort of rocks in it. That's why I prefer the matting. Actually, you don't have to, make sure you get it into the corners as well. With the matting, you don't have to cut it or anything. It will just mould to any sort of weird and wonderful shapes that you've got, whereas the this stuff doesn't. So as an example, this corner I'm going to have to cut and risk wrecking my scissors. You've kind of broken through and it looks a mess. You can, as soon as you start dabbing it back on again, it'll start to look a bit better. And again, because this is the mould, it's not too bad. I can put that in there. There we go. So there's the first bit on. We just carry on. I'll put the rest on, just one layer, and then we'll leave it to dry. And here we are, so that's done. And you can see there's no sort of white bits left apart from the bits I intend to cut off. If it's white, it means it's not properly done. If there's anything bits sticking out, make sure they're just stuck down, that are in the way. These ones are okay because they're part of the mould. I'm just going to cut them off. There we go, there's the first one. Now, number of layers is up to you. I tend to put on a mould about 2 or 3. That gives it a bit of strength, but it's probably worth experimenting. It depends how much strength you want in this. This is quite a small thing and it doesn't need to be very strong. So there we are. I'll wait till that's tacky again and I'll do exactly the same thing. And there we are. Again, I'm going to clean the brush in exactly the same way. So now it's the next day. The mould is set nice and hard, and what I've done, as you can see, I've just taken a saw. I've just taken a little saw and just only the knife, and I've just cut round to make a nice, neat looking mould. There was obviously bits of fibreglass and stuff sticking out. So the next bit is crunch time. We've got to get the thing off the mould, and this is often the most difficult part. What I like to do is get a chisel. A nice blunt one's best, and then you don't sort of cut through things. And what you do, you start going round, now keeping hand out of the way, start to just go around the mould and just starts, and you'll see when it starts to loosen because it'll go white along the edge. You'll know it's come free, and that's now why we've left this ledge on here, because that means that's going to be what we use to release it. And I've just start to sort of wiggle this under here, and you start to see it just going white. What you do, you put the chisel in and then you twist it a little bit, and you'll start to see it come loose. You can also use wooden wedges, anything kind of wedge shaped. Just take it slowly, and slowly work our way around, loosening it as we go. Now, as this one's being a bit stubborn, I'm going for the wooden wedges. What I've done, taken a bunch of these little lolly sticks, and I've just, with a bit of sandpaper, I've just sharpened the edges. So you'll find that these can now be stuck in. I can do that all the way around, just to start to add some pressure to this. Okay, now that I've got a bunch of these wooden wedges in place, they still not come off. What I'll do next, a little bit of water. If I spray it down the gap, that's down here, then that'll do two things. First of all, it'll start to dissolve the release agent that I've put in, because that's water soluble, and it'll also make these wooden wedges start to swell. And with a bit of luck, a combination of the two will cause it to come free. Okay, so this thing has popped while I've been getting a cup of coffee, and you can see that it's gone sort of a white colour, which means it's come away from the mould. There's just one little bit left in there. So I can get in a bit of a blunt chisel in there, and I should be able to just leave that out. So let's go to some of these sticks. It's clearly come away at this end. I can see it's stuck here a little bit. But you can see that the mould is coming off there, just very gently. And the trick is to pull it gently and firmly, not jar it. So you don't want to be hitting it with a hammer or anything like that, because that will jar it and it's liable to break the mould. So just carefully here, just pulling this up. Just coming up now. And there we go. And you can see down here how it's the release agent that's come apart. That's what this all is on here. Okay, the actual mould itself has got release agent in it as well. So what I can do is clean that out with a bit of water, and then there, and clean it up a bit there, is our mould, and you can see it's nice and shiny on the inside, and it matches what this was. So we've now got a mould to make our thing. So now that we've got our mould, You're going to do exactly the same thing in reverse. So you're going to polish it, put some release agent on, and then build up some layers again to make the actual thing. And this time, obviously, it'll be the reverse image of the mould. So we're starting off again, some beeswax, soft cloth, and the boring bit of polishing it. You might notice the other thing I've done is cut the mould down a little bit. So this one was actually quite difficult to get out the mould. It's right on the edge of what will come out easily. So I've cut some of the sides down because all I need is this front part here. These extra bits are just for support. Now don't be tempted to cut off any of these things, as these you need in order to lever the thing out of the mould again. But other bits like this, I can cut those down to make it easier. And in fact, that's what I've done. If you've got a funny shape that really won't come out of the mould, then your best option is to build it in several parts. What you can do is build a fence. So you put a piece of wood across your plug, and then you build half the mould to it. Take the wood away, build the second half of the mould, and then you've got two separate pieces which you can bolt together, and they'll come out more easily. This just about didn't need that. So now we're ready for the release agent again, same stuff as before. Now this time you'll notice what I've done is I've glue gunned, so using a hot weld glue gun, I've attached this to a base, and that just makes it easier when I'm laying down fiberglass or when I'm painting this stuff on. Just stops it from going all over the place and makes the whole process a bit easier. So again, just like before, paint on a load of this stuff over the polished mould, and then we'll be good to go. So now this is ready. It's all polished and it's got its layer of release agent on it. It's ready to start making the actual thing. Now first thing I'm going to do is apply a gel coat again. So what I'm using again, because I haven't got gel coat, I'm going to use normal thin resin. I'm going to leave it to set for a while till it goes a bit thicker, then I'm going to use it like that. The other thing you can do with a gel coat is to add colour to it as well, because if you colour it now, then you won't have to paint it later on. And that's interesting. You can get lots of different stuff. You can get special colours that you mix in with the resin, but you can, in some circumstances, use just paint. So I've got this colour paint that I've painted the rest of the stuff with I want to use. And you can just add a little bit, not too much, because it can affect the way the resin cures. So I'm just going to add a squirt of this, mix it into the resin, and I should see the colour. Now what you need to do, if you're going to do that, is to do a test batch. So you do a test batch with a bit of painting and see if it sets. It may affect the set and it may cause it to not set properly. It may go all sticky and horrible or do other things. So test it before you use it. So first thing I'll do is get some resin. So here we are. Same resin as before, mixed it up. And I'm just going to get a little bit of this. Spray it in there and then mix it up again. And you can see that it's now coloured that resin to a certain extent. As I said, you're going to have to do experiments to see whether it suits what you're doing and whether it reacts, but there we go. I'm going to leave that now to set for a little while. Okay, so here we go. This has gone a bit thicker now, so we're ready to paint this on. And it's just exactly the same as we did last time. Just paint on a nice thick layer and go from there. Now I'm trying not to go over the edges, so when it comes to doing these sides and things, I don't really want it to be forming like a hook over the edge, if you see what I mean, because that will hold on when we're trying to get it out of the mould. So I'm not going to go all the way up to the side here, just mostly. And you can see that I'll probably need several layers of this. Could probably have done with a bit more paint in it as well, to be honest, now I'm looking at it. There we are. And I'll just carry on and do the whole thing. Okay, so it's time for the second coat. Left this to thicken a little bit, and now I can add it the same way. Okay, now we are ready to start putting the fiberglass on. Now, as before, preparation is everything. So I've cut, in this case, 3 bits. I can see that they're going to fit on there, so I'm all ready to go. So I'll take them one at a time. We'll start with this one. Now I'm making sure that it goes over the end there, so that I'm going to have that lever to pry it off with again. Now it doesn't matter if these bits stick over the end, you can trim those off at the end. So off we go. Same deal. Here's one I made earlier, and then just start dabbing away. Okay, so that's done. Final check round, make sure there's no air bubbles in it. You can see now it's the next day. I've taken it off the board, that's why I used a glue gun, so that I could just remove this again. And we've got the mould and we've got the thing in the mould. It's just a case of getting it out. Now, getting it out sometimes is a little bit easier than when you get the mould off the plug, because both sides are slightly flexible. And in fact, you can do things like get my little blunt chisel again and just work it around the gaps, and immediately I can see that I'm starting to go white where it's coming away. So then we can just work around and see if we can get it out first time. So here we go. So I can see that it's coming away here now. And as I go around, I can see that it's getting more and more white popping up. And what I have done is I've trimmed off all the excess around the edges. And if you find that you've got resin across the edge, what you can do is trim it off and then just get a piece of sandpaper and rub it on the sandpaper roll, and that'll take away the bit that sort of hooks over the edge. Okay, let's carry on with this. As it's not quite coming out yet, what I'm going to do is apply my set of lollipop sticks again. Now with this one you just chuck the whole thing in a bucket of water, because both sides are now waterproof and one's not made of wood. You can quite easily chuck it in the bucket of water for an hour, and then when you come back, with a bit of luck, it's free. Okay, now I've got the lollipop sticks, it's starting to move, so I can push in on some of these. You can see it's starting to come away. So I've been working around it for a few minutes, you can see getting a lot more of it to come to that white colour. So now I'm just gently working it with the chisel, and every time that white area is just increasing. You can hear it crack as we go. We can see that white area, get it in the camera properly, just increasing. It comes to a point where we should be able to just pull them apart. And as I sort of carry on pulling it, you can see it's just the last little bit now that's stuck. So I can kind of get that and give it a good, I say a good gentle sort of pull. So just a bit more, and I think we're nearly there. Certainly moving. And there we are. There's our thing. Now obviously I'm going to have to trim off the sides and neaten it up, and you can see, and it's covered in what's it called, release agent, but all in all it's looking all right. So there we are, there's the thing that I made. fit onto my shed. Needs a bit of a clean up. You can see that I have messed up with the pigment. Okay, so should have put a little bit more in, and I think maybe a little bit more consistently. I just squirted some paint in. Recommend experimenting before you play around with the colours, and might even be worth buying the proper stuff, but this has coloured it, so what I'll do is just spray paint over the top of that and it'll look fine. So that's good. So remember, we started off with a wooden plug. We've now got the thing to match it, so you can hold them both up together. There we go, that matches that. And obviously you've still got the mould left, so you can make as many as you want out of that. So if you're going to, lots of corners on your shed or whatever it is you're building, then you can reuse that mould as many times as you like until it finally breaks. So there we are. Hope that's encouraged you to have a little go yourself, have a little experiment, and hopefully you'll make something for yourself.